5 a.m. right now. I am now checked in to my hotel room here in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia. Everything went really well getting into Saudi Arabia. Barely no questions asked at immigration. They just basically looked at my e-visa, which I got online a couple of weeks ago, and stamped my passport, and I was good to go. In the arrivals lounge, I was able to get my SIM card. There are branches of Zain, Mobile, and STC. All of those telecom providers do have offices set up right in the arrivals lounge, and even at like 2 or 3 a.m. they are there to be able to give you a SIM card and get you some data. And I'm here in Saudi Arabia ready to start the next chapter of Nonstop Nikhil, leaving Africa and into the Middle East. This is one of my most favorite regions of the world, and I'm so excited to share it with you all. With that, I'm going to get some rest. It's been a long day. Take care. Have a good night. I will see you tomorrow. Bye. This feels just too much like the US. Texas Roadhouse, P.F. Chang's, IHOP, Cheesecake Factory, Starbucks, Cane's, all right next to one another. But my problem is, like, I need to cross this street right now, and the things are just so built for vehicles that I have no idea where there's even a crosswalk on this main street to get to that side. I'm currently stranded at P.F. Chang's because I don't know how to cross the street here in Saudi Arabia. But oh well, I don't exactly know where. There's like not even like a little crosswalk or anything you can get from this side to that side. It's just not made for humans to be able to navigate at all. Y'all, I've completely given up. There's no way I'm going to be able to cross this like 4-lane highway on this side. So all I've done is just booked an Uber that will then take me to one of the biggest malls here in Jeddah, so we can experience that, because that's an integral part of social life here in the kingdom for sure. We might as well see one of the biggest and best ones here in Jeddah, the Red Sea Mall, because that's where we're heading if our Uber driver can actually get here, and then we'll see what the traffic looks like getting all the way up there, heading north. But this is a warning to you all. If you're planning on visiting a city like Jeddah, make sure that you can navigate by vehicle. Either you have your own or you're planning on Ubering exactly from point A to point B, and then try to think of your itinerary in a way that's centered around those shopping centers or malls. So you know once you get to one spot, there might be food in that same area. There might be whatever else you're looking for right in that same area, so you don't have to waste too much money on transportation and also waste a lot of time on transportation as well. Hello everyone, today is December 6th. It's going to be my first full day here in Jeddah, but I want to take you through everything from right now about 11 a.m. Things just open a little late here, but they tend to stay open until like around midnight, so that's how people time shift, I guess. So I also woke up a little later and then went out to take care of some errands. I needed to get out some cash. Most establishments here will be taking credit cards or other sorts of e-payment and the like. But some of the small chores that you might want to run, or small convenience store kind of transactions, it's good to have some cash on hand. But of course, if I wanted to go get some cash, it means I had to head out of the hotel. That means that everything's on the scale of a vehicle. So if one ATM, it didn't end up working, so I have to walk another 10 minutes to the next ATM, which is like literally just like 2 blocks away, but everything's just so spaced out that it takes so long. I've got a whole day planned, and you know geography is so important because I don't want to be taking Ubers when I don't have to. So my plan is to start our day all the way in the north of the city by the airport, and then work our way down to south of where I am right now, and we'll head to the old city then. Okay everyone, it's just about noon. I'm showered, dressed, packed up. I've got my little backpack here. I'm in the Uber right now, heading to an area, I think it's like right near the airport, but it's meant for like these kind of like fairs and exhibitions and the like. But it's supposed to be an exhibit that is going to start happening once every 2 years, and this is actually the first time it's taking place, about Islamic arts. So it's Biennale al-Funun al-Islamiyya, and I think it takes place over like a 3 or 4 month period this winter, this spring, up until the end of April. But it's free entry, so why not do it? Literally everybody's been telling me, like somebody even on Instagram told me, if you're in Jeddah, you have to go there. and check it out. So that's going to be the first thing we do today. It's open from 11 a.m. and then until 11 p.m. and we're heading all the way to the north of the city. Y'all, I'm finally here and this is stunning. I mean, even before we even touch the art, just like look at the site. So this site is not just any site, it's actually the Hajj terminal of the Jeddah airport, and now it's being repurposed for this incredible art exhibit. This whole exhibit is an effort in terms of showcasing the diversity of the Muslim experience, and there are various galleries here. There are artists that have come to submit their works from all over the Muslim world, and also not only joining the Muslim experience from all around the world, but also across time. That's exactly the intentionality behind this particular exhibit. So amazing how you can take something so traditional, something that we assume to be the same all around the world, something that unifies Muslims, that is like the call to prayer, and give it a visual depiction. And that's exactly what the artist has done here. Behind me, you've got a work which is trying to visually depict the maqams, or the musical scales that are behind the Islamic call to prayer, the adhan. Crazy how different aspects of our previous trip are manifesting themselves in this exhibit. The work behind me is actually a collection of used prayer rugs from Muslim families in Cape Town, South Africa, who are forced to evacuate from their neighborhoods during the apartheid regime. And these are all used prayer rugs, which the artist has then redone, redazzled, rejeweled to create a piece of art. For some reason, from a distance, I thought these were all marshmallows in an effort to remind people that marshmallows contain gelatin and that they're haram. But they're actually taghiyas, like the little prayer caps that a lot of Muslims wear. So there's another connection from one of our previous episodes. Remember when I told you that there were so many Muslim leaders who tried to bring Islam to South Africa, who were persecuted and put in jail and eventually went on to become martyrs? We talked about that in our Cape Town episode. It's exactly what all of these taghiyas are meant to symbolize. They're meant to symbolize Muslims gathered on a mountain, so that's why we have them all hung in different heights, all gathered to mark the death of their religious leader who was oppressed for spreading Islam in South Africa under European rule. Another comparison is the fact that we saw all those columns in the mosques in Tunisia because of the Roman influence on that area. Well, guess what? That Roman influence spread as far as Saudi. Even these columns that used to stand at the gate of the Kaaba itself had those Corinthian-style columns in the 7th and 8th centuries. And that was because Jeddah was the gateway to the two holy sanctuaries, to Medina, to Mecca. And so there were influence coming from all over the world through the port here in Jeddah. And that's why we have these columns which are originally from Syria and Syria was way closer to the Roman Empire at that point, culturally and geographically. And these special columns, these two columns behind me, were brought in from that part of the Middle East through the port of Jeddah to the interior in Mecca, where it stood right next to Islam's most holy sanctuary, the Kaaba. So I just finished touring the 5 different galleries, all of which contain pieces of art catering to a different theme central to Islam. And now I'm going to check out the outdoor portion of the exhibit. There should be one pavilion dedicated to Mecca and another pavilion dedicated to Medina. And what makes it also special is that we get to learn about these sites here in the Hajj terminal of Jeddah's international airport. This would be where millions of pilgrims who are seeking to make their way to Mecca and Medina first arrive in Saudi Arabia from Asia, from Africa, from other parts of the Middle East, pretty much everywhere in the world where there are flights catering to Muslim pilgrims. They would all gather here under these canopies, sheltering them from the harsh sun, from the elements, and getting their first glimpse of the Holy Land in Saudi Arabia. We're actually at the airport right now, so if you hear the buzz of the airplanes, there are airplanes right in front of me. But other than that, other than all the art here, there's also all the amenities you would need for a visit. To spend like a good 4 or 5 hours here, there's actually a lot to do. And so there's multiple restaurants. I think there's like a little ice cream shop here behind me. So I think, since I still have the Mecca and Medina pavilions to see, and this is a nice place to spend some time, I think I might just hit up the restaurant here. And the restaurant is called Nakhil, which is the way that a lot of Arabs Arabize my name. And when they ask me my name just in passing, that's what I usually say as well, because it's something that people can easily write down in Arabic, and it's a word that they're familiar with. And so that's the name of the restaurant. So I think I might as well just go eat there, have lunch. Because if I try to leave this area, then I have to take an Uber anyway. So I might as well just eat here and then check out the rest of the pavilions back there, and then we can see what our next stop will be like in Jeddah. I've been loving this visit so far. I'm so glad that all these Uber drivers, all these random people who have found out that I'm visiting Jeddah, were like, if there's one thing you've got to see during your day here, make sure you come to the Biennale for Islamic art. And I'm glad I did. And it's great timing too, because there's really not much else here in Jeddah that you can do during the day. Everything wakes up at night, so this is a perfect daytime activity. I think Saudis have a really bad rep in the US. Just in the past 2 days, I realized everything that I thought about Saudis is completely wrong. I think we have the notion that all Saudis are rich, but we're only seeing a subset of Saudis in the US. So obviously we're going to see the more well-heeled ones at our universities, in our cities doing the shopping, or when we're out traveling to other countries, especially in Europe. They're going to be the ones that are overrepresented. But when you come here, you see that there are Saudis of all stripes. There are lower class ones, there are middle class ones, and there are definitely those super mega wealthy who are doing all the shopping at those luxury brands on Abdulaziz Avenue. Those definitely exist as well. But let me tell you, every single Uber driver I've had so far, every person that I've mostly dealt with in stores while shopping, or even the docents here at the museums, they've all been actual Saudis, and they've been so friendly, such nice, warm, welcoming people who are so excited to hear that I'm here and that I decided to include their country as part of my itinerary while I travel. You really feel the Arab hospitality when you are here in Saudi Arabia, and that's something that's so different from other Gulf countries, especially if you visit UAE or Qatar. The chances are you might not even encounter an actual Arab citizen while you are there. You're mostly going to be dealing with the expat community, and that's a completely different experience than the actual Arab hospitality that you usually get when you're in most parts of the Middle East. the guides and the docents here definitely seems like they were educated in the US or something, and they've come back to Saudi to work. And so they are pretty bilingual in both. And they'll usually approach me in Arabic, and they give me the whole description of what's going on in Arabic, and then I usually they overhear me doing this commentary or something, and they realize that I'm probably not a native Arabic speaker because I'm speaking to you all in English. And they're like, are you sure you got it? I'm like, no, I completely understood what you just said. It's just that I'm recording in English. This piece behind me is kind of interesting. It is a different perspective into this artist's life who took a DNA test, and then he realized he has roots in Scandinavia, the Middle East, and South Asia, and so he built this little piece to represent all three regions, you know. That's also nice that it's on display here, because even Hijaz, the province where we are right now in Saudi Arabia, is such a diverse place. It has people who've used Jeddah's port as a gateway to Mecca and Medina, and it's always been such a cosmopolitan part of the world, in conversation with Egypt, in conversation with the rest of the Gulf and the Middle East, in conversation with South Asia as well. So not all of Saudi Arabia is that desert, tribal, non-settled population. Jeddah has always had a settled population because of the port, because of the gateway for pilgrims, because of the Red Sea trade, because of all of these factors. So there's always been an old city here, and there's always been a cosmopolitan settled culture here.
So ये यहाँ पे मैच है जो मोरिटानिया से है. Can see this match?
मैं मोरिटानिया भी गया हूँ.
अच्छा. Okay. So ये मोरिटानिया से है, ये कैमल की उससे है, ये लेदर जो डार्क ब्राउन है कैमल लेदर.
Okay.
और जो लाइट ब्राउन है ये गन्ने का वो जो घास होता है, आपको पता है, उससे है बनाया हुआ.
One docent just came up to me asking if I wanted an explanation of what was going on in that particular area. And I'm like, sure. She's like, do you want English or Arabic? I said, give me Arabic. And she's like, oh, I don't really speak Arabic that well, but I'll give it a shot. And so I let her explain it to me in Arabic, and then I asked her, okay, so what's your actual language? And she told me Urdu. She's like, Pakistani. But she was born here, her family's from Islamabad. So I'm like, oh yeah, well, my family's from India. And then so we shifted to Hindi Urdu at that point. And she was just telling me about how much things have changed here in Saudi Arabia just in the past months, in the past few years. I mean, it's nothing like what we normally think about Saudi Arabia in the US, with the separate entrances, the forced dress codes on women not being able to go out alone, not being able to drive. Literally all of those policies no longer exist today. If you come here, you will not be seeing any of that. You might be seeing some of the remnants of that infrastructure, but in practice, none of that happens anymore. And she's been telling me about how literally in the blink of an eye, things have changed for women here. I did ask her whether these almost overnight reforms are generally popular here amongst the people, and she said, yeah. People really, really like it. They don't know really where their country's going, but they know that it's going the right way, even though it's moving really, really quickly here. She also mentioned to me that apart from this particular Biennale event, this is just such an iconic venue for Saudis, or at least those who've spent a lot of time here in Saudi Arabia, because when they were growing up, they would always come here to pick up their relatives and friends who'd be visiting from Pakistan and who'd be coming here for Hajj and for their pilgrimage. This is exactly where they would have their first point of arrival. And so you've got all these photographs behind me showing Hajjaj, or pilgrims here to make Hajj, arriving here in Jeddah and using this terminal as their gateway to fulfilling one of the tenets of their religion, pilgrimage. I don't know how to express just how friendly everybody I've met here really is. It's not just like the people who are trained to cater to travelers here at the galleries, but it's everybody. The Uber drivers are so friendly. When I tell them that it's my first time in Saudi Arabia, just like their face completely lights up, and I get all the standard kind of like Arabic greetings and salutations, and people just showing their excitement for me to be here, and they want to know what I'm planning on doing, where I'm planning on going, what I've done so far, like whether I've eaten kabsa yet, and also just the whole like, mashallah, you speak Arabic so well, all this kind of stuff. So I love it, love it. And also with the clothing, everybody just like, no, you've got to wear your Saudi clothing, like wear an igal, wear the shamag, wear like the full headdress. It doesn't matter if you're not doing it right. Like you're gonna see all sorts of people like dressed in all sorts of ways when you're here in Saudi Arabia. We don't judge. It's just the telltale signs of a country that's starting to open up, receive the world, and is proud to show off what it has and what it stands for. Okay, I think I've seen the majority or maybe even all of the galleries here, and I'm ready to head south to the old city of Jeddah known as Balad. I want to make sure I get out of here before rush hour because it took a while to get here from where I'm staying, and we've got to go even further south to get to the old town. As I've told you earlier, this is a great thing to do during the daytime because it's actually nice to be here when there aren't a lot of other people here. Pretty much for everything else you want to do in Jeddah, you want to do it in the evening time when more people end up showing up. Like yesterday, even when I was at the mall around like 4:30 to 6 p.m., there was no one there. Only after like 7 p.m. when people started showing up after they had left work, then went back home and then had some time for recreational activities like the mall. Even things like the Corniche or going out to a Balad, anything where people want to spend time in public places, those usually only start getting busy later on in the evening. But a museum atmosphere like this, that's something you want to do when there aren't a lot of other people around. Hello everyone, so after like a really long taxi ride from the airport, I am now south of where I'm actually staying in Balad area of Jeddah. This is what you can call the old town or the historic center before all the development that came with the discovery of oil and petroleum here in the Gulf. This would have made up the entirety of the city of Jeddah. This neighborhood is probably one of the only organically pedestrian-friendly parts of Jeddah because this whole area obviously existed before the advent of motor vehicles. So it's made on a human scale. It's the historic center. It would have been around just like it stands today for at least a few centuries. This is the neighborhood in Jeddah closest to the Islamic seaport. So Hijaz, as I told you, in Jeddah is a part of Hijaz. Hijaz was always a very cosmopolitan area because of all the outside influences coming in through the seaport. After the discovery of oil and the boom in the oil industry, that meant that more of the local residents wanted to live wealthier lifestyles, more American lifestyles, and that meant leaving the tight, narrow streets of this more human scale part of town and creating newer neighborhoods outside of the city center where you could have malls and parking lots, drive your vehicle around, have a backyard, have a front yard, have a garden, have it all out in the new neighborhoods. We've talked about capital flight, white flight in other videos. There's a sort of similar dynamic going on here in Balad. There's definitely capital flight as the newly rich Arabs wanted to leave this area of town to live their new Western style lifestyles out in the suburbs. And so while this used to be the entirety of Jeddah, this area is now primarily home to immigrant and expat communities, some of whom have been here for centuries, obviously, and some of them who are new arrivals, either to stay here, to work here, or to visit here as pilgrims. I just saw like a huge group of Indonesian pilgrims here, and so there's a bunch of amenities here, tourist shops, travel agencies, hotels, and the like catering to them as well. Hey, this neighborhood also has crosswalks. You have no idea. If you actually spend some time in these cities, you'll see what an amazing sight this is to have a crosswalk where you don't have to die when you want to just cross the street. These markets basically represent the original Saudi shopping mall and the original shopping culture that exists in this part of the world, because you would have for centuries just items coming over from all around the world to be traded here in Jeddah. And at the same time, so many things would be leaving Jeddah to go out to the rest of the world. Just in the course of my series so far, we've talked about the trans-Saharan trade, we've talked about the Red Sea trade, we've talked about the Indian Ocean trade, and Jeddah would be a stop along all of those trades just because of its significance as the gateway to the holy sanctuaries of Medina and Mecca. sign outside of this mosque behind me, Al-Memar Mosque, tells me that it's one of the oldest buildings here in Jeddah, and it's been around since the inception of the city in the late 1600s. I think we're in some sort of central square of sorts, because like look at all these buildings behind me converging on this one public space. You've got this like really like fancy house, which I believe is also a museum right behind me. And then you've got all of these buildings which are now containing stores on the ground floor with their signature balconies and doors all done in wood. It's really, really gorgeous. Like they maintain the style throughout all of these buildings right here. And the thing is like that this part of the city is probably one of the poorest parts right now. However, I think the government, after opening tourist visas, sees the value in reinvesting, in renovating, in reconstructing, remodeling these old traditional structures now that tourists are definitely visiting. And I see scaffolding everywhere saying that there's a project underway to renovate these old structures. And at the moment, this whole Balad area of Jeddah is currently a World Heritage Site, so they have almost no other choice but to throw some money in this area to restore it to its original beauty. Just contrast all of this from Abdulaziz Street, like the street that basically felt like one big mall, or even entire neighborhoods that just feel like they're all exist to serve people as one big mall. This feels so much more in tune with the rest of the region. If you think about visiting souks in Istanbul or in Damascus or even in Jordan, and in Saudi, it's a lot harder to tell exactly where people are from. If they're actually Saudis, they're Indian, Pakistani, from other parts of the Arab world. There isn't as much of a disparity I find here in terms of just how people look and how wealthy they are, because there are so many middle and lower class Saudis themselves. They blend in with the other classes and other guest workers and the like. And that's very, very different from Qatar or the Emirates, where you know an Emirati is an Emirati or a Qatari is a Qatari, and there's no question about it, because there's such a gap between the citizens or nationals and everybody else. And it's so welcoming and refreshing that it's not like that here. Because I think we tend to lump everybody in one category in the Gulf, that they're all rich, they're all arrogant, and I'm sure that crust exists here, but it's not everybody. It's definitely not the majority in Saudi, for sure. The Maghrib sunset prayer just ended, so that's why the streets are a little bit empty right now. Everyone's probably praying and then gonna have dinner and then head back to the street with their families or the like. So things are a bit quiet now. I'm just walking around. There's supposed to be some really nice coffee shops around here that are very atmospheric and just take you back to old 19th, 20th century Middle East with like music playing and the like. So I'm just looking out for those. But I'm not trying to just get on Google Maps and find them, and I figured I might as well walk around and take advantage of being in such a pedestrian-friendly part of town for the moment. My update is that I still haven't found what I'm looking for, and there are like roadblocks walking around the old town, because I think there are parts that are kind of dilapidated like this that they don't necessarily want you to look at, or they have scaffolding around because they're planning on renovating at the moment. I figured that for the rest of my whole week here in Saudi Arabia, I'm gonna have plenty of opportunities to have authentic Saudi food. But when I'm here in one of the most cosmopolitan cities that I've been in so far, then I really want to make sure I have some international food. So I was like looking up on Google, there was this Indonesian restaurant here, and I haven't had Indonesian food. I was actually really craving Thai, but the reviews for the Thai restaurant just a block away from here were not as good as the reviews for this Indonesian place. So I figured let's try something new. So I ordered myself some chicken fried noodles at the Indonesian place and some iced tea. It shouldn't be bad. I made like literally the safest decision possible while still trying something new. But this is just a short walk away from where I was. I'm still in Balad, in the old part of town, and then I can easily just grab an Uber back to my hotel after dinner. It's really, really interesting just seeing so many people out when it's dark. And there's this, again with the car culture, there's this sort of almost tailgating going on where everyone just picks a spot, parks their vehicle there, and then does a range of activities hanging out around their vehicle. In one super impressive setup, somebody actually connected the electricity in their vehicle to a television, to a street light, and they were broadcasting a soccer match from their vehicle and chilling with a majlis set up right in front of their vehicle with a gas burner and tea or coffee or something brewing on the gas stove. Most of them just end up looking like a picnic where it's a family come together, bought some takeout, and is deciding to sit along the water here. So the time has come. I've unsurprisingly hit a literal roadblock. Thing is, I can't cross from this side of the water to over where you see the city on that side. Yeah, there's no road that's pedestrian friendly that will get me from this side to that side of the water, so I've got to call myself an Uber. Well, if you can't tell, I'm having a pretty good time here in Jeddah. Saudi Arabia is not at all as foreign as I was expecting it to feel. It feels very much like home. It feels very much like other places I've been to in the Middle East. It even feels so much like the US in so many nuanced ways. But trust me, I do not think Jeddah is representative of all or even some of Saudi Arabia. I think what will be really interesting is when we go into the smaller towns, we can see exactly what has changed there and what hasn't changed there ever since all the new Crown Prince's reforms have taken place. Y'all, I just crossed the street from the Corniche, made it to the Palestine street walk. There's actually a sign on the street saying that this is like a walking street. Basically means that the amenities exist here to let there be pedestrians, unlike the vast majority of streets. And I generally know this street since this is the street I'm mostly on with it's not far from my hotel. So I know from here I can definitely walk the maybe half a dozen or so blocks back to my hotel and then cross some of the smaller streets and then get back to exactly where my hotel is. Generally, Jeddah doesn't receive a lot of tourists. And I don't know why, because it's such a great introduction to Saudi Arabia, because there's so much that the city has in common with other places in the Middle East, especially like places like Egypt or just big cities in the Middle East in general. It's very cosmopolitan. It has a history that's been in conversation and constantly been engaged with other places in the region. So this is a perfect introduction to somewhere in Saudi Arabia. I highly recommend you start here instead of starting in Riyadh. But at the same time, there's a saying in Saudi Arabia that Jeddah ghair, meaning Jeddah is always different, it's the exception. The fact that it's always been a multicultural melting pot, meeting ground for different cultures, means that usually it's a great place to introduce reforms. It's one of the more liberal areas of Saudi Arabia, and the social climate of coastal liberal Hijaz and Jeddah has always been balanced by the conservatism and religiosity of the interior area, specifically Najd, which is where Riyadh is based. But with that, I'm so excited to have shown you a little bit of Jeddah, at least what I did. I think it was really a great start here in Saudi Arabia. But with that, I am also so excited to meet you all tomorrow in the next episode of Non-Stop Nikhil, where we wake up, take the train to the second holiest city in Islam, and that is Medina. Hope you all will join me for that. with that, I'm just a block away right now from my hotel. I'm gonna say goodnight. Take care. Bye, everyone.